Hello, guys. This is Dr. Anatole, and as usual, but this time on a Skype call, we have Mike. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
So, what should we talk about today?
I think today I wanted to kind of differentiate between different types of intelligence. You could be uh, smart with your mind, you can be smart with your heart, and you could be smart spiritually. So I kind of wanted to differentiate those three things.
Hmm. This is actually a very interesting subject, and we did talk a little bit before we started recording, and I did think a little bit about it, and what I'm realizing is that before we even talk about these three um, distinctive intelligences, I think that when they all come together, that is work of wisdom. So we will end up talking about different levels of wisdom eventually.
All right.
So as a way of introduction, we all know that some people are very smart intellectually, but could be emotionally quite stunted. There's lots of funny stories, probably not true, about these different hackers and computer scientists who, are very smart and can program a computer so well, but they don't know how to have a girlfriend. And there's this cartoon about how do you stop hacker from hacking, and and the solution is to get him a girlfriend. Um, but the idea is that we all know people who are um, socially awkward, but intellectually smart, and we also know that the majority of people are socially not that awkward, but they're definitely not smart. That's just on a very basic level. And then there is the spiritual level, which is I shouldn't use the word level, but the so-called spiritual thing, that would be how perceptive people are to what is true, what is authentic in their life, and what is not authentic. And most people do not live authentic life. They really just follow what the crowd wants them to do, what the culture wants them to do, what their parents want them to do. Something that I've been talking about incessantly to death. So we have, it's fairly common, for people to um, understand what intellectual smarts is and what emotional intelligence is. Even though I would say that emotional intelligence is probably not as understood in just about any culture, particularly Western culture. Um, but still, it is something which is readily available. Spiritual intelligence isn't. Spiritual intelligence is very much connected with levels of wisdom, what we call in my system, different phases of love or different phases of wisdom, and people do not stay at one phase or level of wisdom in their life. Sometimes they ascend, so to speak. Sometimes they descend. So it's not some kind of fixed thing that if you attain some phase or level, and you'll stay at that level. I mean, you can still do stupid things, or you can occasionally do some really smart things. But this is the big distinction is that in our society we favor intellectual, mental smarts, but we do not favor emotional smarts as much, and spiritual smarts we do not favor. In fact, we tend to denigrate them. Even like if you go to most churches, most religious institutions, they give lip service to spiritual things. They usually talk a lot about emotional intelligence, which would come under my favorite thing, life coaching, and I'm being sarcastic. And they will use intellectual means to talk about these things. And occasionally you'll find, people using music to tune into different emotional states, which some people would say are hysterical. And I don't mean hysterical as ha ha ha, I mean hysterical as crazy. And a wise person would understand in different ways that there is appropriate time for these intelligences. Sometimes you need to make a decision and use your mind. Sometimes you need to make a decision and use your heart. And ultimately, you should always make your decisions based on whether this decision is authentic to you or not. So I was just having a conversation with my father, about arts in particular, and we were talking about authenticity of artists, and our conversation ultimately went to the common thing for me is like, if you think that art is useless, if you think spirituality is useless, you should go and trade stocks on the stock market, because that's like the most pure expression of basically, well, in many ways, lack of authenticity, and not for everyone, of course. But you should do what your heart calls you for, and it will be almost always in conflict with what society wants you to do or what brings you money. So you're lucky if what your heart wants you to do is also something that sells easily. But then it wouldn't be very, very interesting, because if your life is easy, well, you're not going to develop a lot of wisdom, because wisdom comes from, from the University of Hard Knocks. It helps to have all kind of difficult situations in life, particularly situations that do not have any ready-made solution. Like, for example, getting yourself in some kind of horrendous debt, or developing, God forbid, a drug problem. So something that requires unusual solutions because of the unusually, let's say, painful or weird or difficult situation. And that inevitably makes us call our inner resources. They have to come from our most authentic center, and that is going to call us to balance between all these three intelligences: intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. And by the way, this intellectual, emotional, and spiritual, this is a product of the classification, I think, of the Western civilization. So we need to be mindful that there are other intelligences. There's also tribal intelligence and cultural intelligence and I don't know, extraterrestrial intelligence. I am a product of Western culture in many, many ways. So
Sure.
my mind is limited by that. And scratching my nose is much better than trying to pick my nose. We will evolve to that, the nose picking meditation in the future. So any comment?
No, I think all of what you said made sense. I just I don't know, maybe speaking about it in the abstract isn't the only way to go about it. Um, I agree that there are, of course, more types of intelligence, whether that be tribal or otherwise. You know, you could
I
even
guess
say the ability to feel the forest when you're walking in the forest is a different type of intelligence, I suppose. But you know, I don't know. I guess the point of discussing it and bringing it up is more, so that it's clear that, we don't assume that people have just one type of smarts.
Well, I think that this is a super important thing, and I have two things to say about this. One is a comment that I don't remember. Yeah, it was one of the Russian biologists who is getting really, really famous over there. He talks about how we in the West value certain kind of intelligences, but like if you go to the Bushmen of Africa, the environment in which they're quite comfortable, but if you take any Westerner to those environments, we're probably not going to even survive one day. A tiger is going to eat us, or a lion or whoever, and we will probably get bitten by a poisonous snake, and we'll certainly just die of starvation after 2 3 days because we will not be able to find any, hunt any whatever, or gather any whatever. So that's one thing. So someone who appears stupid to one culture may not be stupid at all in another culture. They may just not be exposed to things that you were exposed. And this, by the way, is a really, really problematic, in my opinion, artifact of American culture. In the United States, people very commonly assume that there is only one type of intelligence and only one type of culture, and frankly, on one type of language. But I don't want to go into this too much. Um, but what I do want to point out big time is that intellectual intelligence, the mental intelligence, is very much on the surface. It's much easier to understand what that is. Emotional intelligence is a bit more washed out and quite a bit more abstract, and it is difficult. It's harder to define what that is, and it's harder to teach people that. And some say it's impossible. I don't think that's true. And spiritual intelligence is even more abstract and appears more wishy-washy, and it also appears so much less practical than emotional intelligence or intellectual mental intelligence. Also, spiritual intelligence is not really about survival, which emotional intelligence and mental intelligence is very much that way. So, in terms of survival, spiritual intelligence is probably useless on a very basic level. On a deeper level, I don't think it's useless at all. I think it's actually more useful than anything else, because ultimately our aspirational things, what we want in our life, and the satisfaction that we have individually and as a society, is pretty much entirely based on how tuned we are to spiritual intelligence, how spiritually intelligent we are. And what I see, for example, I don't want to use the word political, but we can see in unwise societies, there is so much strife over things that are very easily solved through spiritual and emotional intelligence. But because people fail to tune into those things, or they just don't have it, they are not trained in it, or they don't even know that they can be trained in it, they make some horrendously stupid things, not only on individual level, but also on a collective level. And are they culture? Yeah, of course they're part of culture. But it's so much nicer to be in a culture where people are welcoming, so much nicer to be around people who know how to connect with each other, which is all about emotional and spiritual intelligence. So much nicer to be around creative people who do creative, authentic things by themselves. They don't talk about it as much as they do it. And we're not talking about that, every culture has all of these things, but in some cultures they have more of these things. because those cultures encourage these things. And and we should encourage full expression of all of these intelligences, because that would ultimately be connected very much with how wise the society is and how wise people are who live in that society. Society that encourages that type of balance, that type of wisdom, is a wiser, more balanced society. And individuals in it are more satisfied, happier with their life, to put it crassly. So, any comment?
I don't know. I don't know if happiness is the only goal.
Oh, most certainly not. I think satisfaction is very much more important than happiness. I think that a person who fights for their country, fights for some ideals, may not be happy because they haven't achieved their ideal, but they might be satisfied because they put up a good fight, and they have made an effort. And happiness is very simple. It's drug related. You smoke dope and you'll be happy for the 15 minutes or however time it takes for the trip to wear out. But if you want to have a really deep satisfaction, deeper happiness, that's what I would call real happiness, not just pleasure. That is very much connected with how authentic your life is, how deep you dig your life, and how well you express that depth. And that's all about wisdom for me.
And sorry, just making sure that I'm connecting all the threads here. Can I live a life full of satisfaction without spiritual depth and spiritual intelligence?
I think that's a spectacular question. Well, it depends on what your life's purpose is, what your soul's purpose is. So, if you are satisfied with basic things like having family and having children, having a job, which is absolutely not a bad thing, it's a great thing, then this is fine. There's lots of people who want just to live their life. They don't want to, write books. They don't want to talk spirituality like I'm doing right now. They just want to live, common life. This is fine. We do need to have managers. We do need to have lawyers. We do need to have doctors, etc. These people are, well, at the very least, they're useful, and their life could be full of, satisfaction from this interaction with the society. But there are some people who need more, who have, let's call it, deeper aspirations. I do not judge any of these things. If your life is authentic, according to your own standard of authenticity, that's all there is to it, to a spiritual life. But yes, life, as you seek out your desires, these desires, as they get fulfilled, they change your perspective, and your perspective usually deepens from satisfying your desires, particularly if through satisfying, along the path of satisfying your desire, you have had enough obstacles that led you to question deeply how appropriate your desires are to your own fulfillment. And in that situation, you will probably start digging deeper, and the deeper you dig, well, the deeper your life will be. Is it something good or bad? Well, it isn't, because we're not talking about good or bad. So you most certainly can live without spiritual intelligence. But spiritual intelligence, on some level, you don't even need to name it that way. There are lots of people who are very authentic without talking about it and naming it. And lots of people who are very inauthentic while talking about how authentic they are. I mean, I think most of people in the New Age community are that type of bullshitters. They want to live an authentic life, but they don't have guts to do it. And so they talk about authenticity all day long, but if you look at their life, it's actually quite shallow and not very authentic. So you can say that they're authentic in their inauthenticity. So they are learning how to be authentic by exposing themselves to their own bullshit. So we shouldn't judge these people, but at the same time, let's define things as they are. In other words, if people are bullshitting themselves,
hold on now, because now
yeah,
you're going on a stretch here. So I want to interrupt you, and I'm
sure.
going to say, I'm going to put this out there, which is maybe those folks don't actually know what authenticity is. So they're just pretending and hoping that that's what it's going to be. But beyond that, at that point, then we should define what authenticity is.
Go for it.
Oh, you think I know? I'm not going to fake that one.
Well, here's the thing. I just defined it. Authenticity is basically living your life as best to your inner truth as you can. And this, of course, has many, many levels. And that's why I was half joking that, exposing yourself to your own inauthenticity is really just a process of becoming more conscious of what is and isn't authentic for you. And I don't think there is anything wrong with that process at all. Just because I don't like you at your level of authenticity doesn't mean that you're wrong or inauthentic. Because I have my own criteria, but these criteria are my own. They are not right or wrong for you. So just because I don't particularly like certain people in this town, because I think that they're inauthentic. Inauthentic to what? Inauthentic to my own journey. I mean, I don't like their level of authenticity, their level of spirituality, quote unquote, in relation to me. That doesn't mean that they're wrong. It doesn't mean that they're inauthentic. Can they go deeper? Sure, they can, but that's not my job. And at this point, it's not their job either. That's why they're not going anywhere. So they're in the process of becoming conscious of their shallowness. That's how I see it. And they see me as full of shit, which is, from their point of view, undoubtedly is true. You know, and we're not. They're not wrong, and I'm not wrong. You can say that people in this county jail, which we have a few miles from my house, they're having an inauthentic experience by being incarcerated. Well, maybe from my point of view or your point of view, from their point of view, they are in jail, and that's their experience. And they can be as authentic as they can be in that environment. Do I want to relate to these people? Absolutely not. I mean, as a group. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm sure that there are some individuals there who are just fine. I'm just saying that just as an example that, so yeah, I mean, you can live your life. Go ahead.
In fact, some of these people are having more authentic lives because they have less external distractors.
Correct, yeah. That is exactly where I'm going with all this. It's just, they are the ones who define their own authenticity as you are and I am. And just because if I don't want to talk to them doesn't make them in any way less or more authentic. It's just I don't want to talk to them. But the bottom line of it is that we all know that there are some people who are, we can see that they can be more authentic. They can be more tuned to their soul, more tuned to their emotions, and frankly tuned to their, poorly thinking mind than they are right now. They're not living up to their potential. But who are you and who am I to talk about their potential? Unless they come to you and start, asking you, how can they live better life? That's a different situation. But if they don't come to you and ask you this, well, they're more than, they're more than allowed to live in their own level of authenticity, except for one little thing. You know what that is?
No.
When their stupidity start to affect directly you, when they take, whatever, take actions from their level of inauthenticity and come and create problem for you because of their lack of wisdom, etc. Well, it affects you directly. So the level of consciousness of the society directly affects you, and indirectly too. Stupid people have stupid vibe, and that vibe does affect you, no question about it. I mean, if you go to that same jail, I'm sure that the atmosphere in that jail is more depressing than the atmosphere in, a church, which is like half a mile away from me. At least that's, in theory, a place where people rejoice is going to have better vibe, better vibration, better environment than, a county jail. The same way, some cultures that are more open and more welcoming and more creative will have better atmosphere than cultures that are less creative, less open, less welcoming. It's just how things are. And are they wrong? None of them are wrong, but one place is better than the other for sure. And yes, you can say, yes, for you it's better. Yeah, absolutely. Some people like to be around closed-minded people and unwelcoming people and people who have depressing thoughts and who are stuck. And some people don't. They like to be around people who are not stuck, who are open, who are welcoming, etc. This all has to do with the level of their spiritual and emotional and intellectual intelligence. And it connects very much with education as well. I mean, if we educate children in what spiritual intelligence is and emotional intelligence is and intellectual intelligence is, they will, at worst, be aware, and at best, they will try to multiply, increase, augment their level of wisdom, their level of joy, their level of authenticity.
I don't know that that's true, but what I will say, I apologize for interrupting here, but what I will say is that education provides options.
Well, that's exactly what
That
I'm
doesn't
talking
mean you have
about.
to take them, but it provides them.
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to say that you in particular, individual X, will become fantastic, amazing, wow, wow from education. But as a group, most certainly, if you give people options, if you give them a vision of something better, if you give them choices, inner choices, if you expose them to poetry, to literature, to art, to music, to different spiritual traditions, so that they have options, choices, I bet you that they will make better choices. All of them? Of course not. But many of them, yes. So if you grow up in a society which has very strong spiritual component, most certainly you will have better understanding of your spiritual options. If you grow up in a society that tends to be closed, emotionally, you will not be as aware of your options as potentially emotionally intelligent being. It's just how things are. And I mean, I can give a million of examples. Uh, when education systems change from better to worse or from worse to better, the outcomes are pretty darn evident. They did this in Finland a few years back, I think 30 or so years back, and their system is supposedly the best in the world. And they did just the opposite in Russia about the same time, and they are reaping the results right now, according to people I listen to. And I'm not an expert in this, but it's definitely you know, as examples, it will definitely work.
Well, there you have it.
My dear friends, Very nice to have you on a video with us. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. If you listened that far and you didn't subscribe, my God, we will have to send a spiritually authentic but very dangerous demon to make sure that you subscribe. Have a good one.